welcome back. And we are moving into our first conversation for this morning as we dive into another perspective on the upcoming referendum vote on whether or not to go to the ICJ. We have with us this morning representing the Vision Inspired by the People, VIP, Paul Morgan and Hubert Enriquez. And as you were telling me, Paul, also representing what you call the peace movement. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Good morning.
Now, we've had multiple conversations on this issue and even a few town hall sessions as well. And it is very important that we're able to equip viewers with just about all perspectives when it comes to this issue. And the VIP, specifically, both of you, have spoken at length publicly about why you feel that Belizeans should vote no on the day of the referendum. I want to start off by just finding out how you formulated this specific position.
Okay, first of all, let me say a pleasant good morning to you, Marlene, and the listeners out there. I want to say a blessed good morning. Hope your day goes well. Let's start with the foundation, though, and I'll come to answer your question directly as to how we formulated it. What we're dealing with at this time, so that listeners may understand, is this document here called the Special Agreement. This is the terms of reference by which our leadership is proposing that Belize goes willingly with Guatemala to the ICJ. Well, as you asked, what is the foundation of it? If you look at what George Price was saying in the prayer, the national prayer that he promoted, he prayed for sobriety, soberness. And we're seeing from many years ago now that Belize has been in a state of the lack of sobriety, like political drunkenness, you could say. You hear people in the same camp speaking two different languages. One is saying that we got this country by a treaty, and the other one is saying we didn't get this country by treaty. But be that as it may, we're looking at a special agreement that legitimizes claims by Guatemala. We say these claims are illegitimate because the original issue was a deal gone bad between Britain and Guatemala. In doing so, we are violating our constitution. It is like a drunken person coming into their homes and breaking up their stuff, their own stuff, violating our constitution, and then finally risking our own existence. That is nothing short of political drunkenness. So how we came to the conclusion there, how did we come to the idea that we should not go to the ICJ, is by these assessing the whole situation and finding out that this is the situation. Belizeans must be aware that our leadership over the years has been basically politically drunk, absence of morality. I'll substantiate it with some claims I read in your news items just the other day. The leader of the opposition today is saying that we have our papers for this country. The papers was the 1859 treaty. Well, in 2000, his own compatriot, Mr. Musa, said that the foundation of our territory, how we got this country, is not based on treaties. That was a letter that he wrote officially in his youth to the Guatemalans. Now, how could two leaders of one party be saying two different things? I think that is a classic political drunkenness. And then we have the other side who is saying that, listen, we only our foreign minister, we only went through with this because you all started it, you know. What kind of reasoning, what kind of leadership is that? And after how many years now? It's 18 years, 2008, 10 years that this special agreement has been put together. How is it that they still, the opposition, still can't find an official position? Their southern caucus is going one way, the central caucus is going another way, and the UDP is saying, well, you guys, ministers and all the political people, you can vote a conscience vote. Where is our leadership? That's the foundation that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, I first of all want to thank you guys for once again having this conversation, which is very critical. And I wanted to congratulate the 25 for seeing the need to have this kind of discussion. I want to first of all, quickly make reference to a point you mentioned earlier, Brother Paul, which is to say that there was a vote by the Southern Caucus of the People's United Party in which they are rejecting the call to go to the ICJ. And we want to commend them. In fact, we've heard that there are other groups who have actually commended them. And we certainly want to commend them. We think it's a bold step, a bold move, and I think it sets the direction. For those persons who feel that they're going to be affected more than other parts of this whole matter. But essentially, just to cap off what Brother Morgan spoke about earlier, our objection really has to do with several things. One, including the process that has been applied, in the sense that the special agreement, in our opinion, violates the Constitution, in the sense that it is seeking to give to the ICJ the power to define our boundaries. And that power, in our opinion, has been already given to the National Assembly. They are the only ones who are authorized to amend the Constitution. And so there is a problem with that. There is also a flaw in the special agreement, which means that we won't know the extent of the claim until after we've actually voted to go to the ICJ. So that for those persons who are going to be voting, they won't know what they're voting for. You know, and clearly, if, for instance, you know that the claim is going to affect the entire country as opposed to a small portion of the country, then I think your vote will be influenced by that. So it's a very critical omission to not to have actually mentioned what exactly that claim is. Also, in terms of the process, this matter is an existential threat to Belize. I mean, it is possible that if we vote yes, there is going to be, and in fact, if at some point the ICJ rules in favor of Guatemala, it is going to mean that persons are going to be deprived of their property. And so that those matters, in our opinion, need to be focused on and explained to people long before they go to vote. No? And so those are very, very important issues. But in my mind, more fundamentally, is that we own this country of Belize. I mean, we have been told that we own this country. We know we own this country. We have fought for this country before. In fact, even when we got our independence, it was gotten on the backs of the fact that the British had taken out tons and tons of resources of this country. And so, in our opinion, we have actually paid for this country. And for us to be told now that we really don't own our country after all that, and having even the United Nations declare that we are independent and we have our territory intact, it's a betrayal of trust, in our opinion. And so our position really is based on a principle that, in fact, this country is ours, and that we feel that it's a betrayal law for us to be told that, in fact, we need to go to the ICJ to define our country.
Now, I appreciate the inclusion of the special agreement in this conversation, because where I feel that the conversation is now focused on whether or not to go to the ICJ, some have even attributed it to being triggered by the referendum in Guatemala. But really, the decision was made from 2008 at the penning of the compromise. Now, looking at those who are promoting a yes vote or running the education campaign, the reasons for why they tell Belizeans that they feel is best fit to go to the ICJ are very clear. Now, if you were to do the same in a counter argument, why should a person, when they go to the polls, vote no to going to the ICJ? What are your specific reasons?
Okay, well, Marlene, first of all, I'd like to challenge you in saying that there people who are saying, yes, let us go to the ICJ, they are very clear. I don't think so. I think that they're all over the place, like I mentioned. The only prevailing argument is it is a legal argument, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's what they're saying, it's a legal argument there, and the only place the United Nations has to settle legal arguments is the ICJ. And so,
well, if I can use what has been what has been communicated to us, that is, it is going to the ICJ, that we have a very strong case, and that it will bring a resolution to the issue.
Okay,
those
good.
would be some of the reasons why the proponents for a yes vote keep on telling others to do so.
we have a strong case.
Yes.
That is there. We have a strong case. Now, I am amazed that such a narrative could be put to the Belizean people when in fact Guatemala hasn't even filed its case. According to this document, it says any and all legal claims. Belizeans don't know what Guatemalans will be claiming. So how could you say that we have a strong case? It is Guatemala that will be claiming, you know. Guatemala will be making their case, not Belize. They have not made that case yet. It's any and all at this point. How could we believe such a thing, that we have a strong case when a case has not been filed? I can't buy that. So your question, though, is
Why not?
clearly, why not? Like I said, why not? Number one, we start with our Constitution. We have been instructed by our Chief Justice in 2016 to, speaking to university students, graduation, that is UB graduation in 2016. Chief Justice says, in this matter, the first thing you do is start with your Constitution. And our Constitution says that before changing our boundaries, we need 2/3 majority of the House. So our first issue, not even going outside of our country, is looking inwards to say that we need to satisfy the requirements of our Constitution if we're going to give another institution, especially a foreign powerful organization, the right to define our boundaries. Is that clear?
So that's your first reason
That's,
to know.
that's
It goes against the
against
Constitution.
the Constitution. So whenever, if we cannot move from there, then it must stay there. Well, the second thing is, like Brother Hubert mentioned, Belize, and the ordinary person out there tells us every day, why we going the ICJ when we know the country is ours? They understand that Belize has been fought for. Belize, we were born here. We have the right to be free, the right to be free where we were born. So we do have that, what you call self-determination, and all of these issues come under self-determination. We are human beings. We were born here. We have the right to live. We have the right to live where we were born, and we have the right to live freely where we were born. A country claiming our territory is dehumanizing us. And so that is the second issue. That is a moral issue. And to say that this is a legal issue only, and all the liars would like to say, well, you can't talk about that because you're not a liar. Well, we are equal Belizeans, I want to remind them. We are all Belizeans. We equally own this territory. And so I just gave you two of these salient issues. If we can't pass that, then we really should not be going. But most of all, it is because our leadership has abdicated that responsibility of good leadership. from day one, from independence. Okay?
Let me get Hubert in on this point specifically, because you have written a publication speaking of recognizing the strength of the case, but your concern is not so much about the strength of the Belizean case going to the ICJ. It is about the potential rulings that may come out of the ICJ. Can you explain that further to us?
Well, I want to see that, in fact, we have worked on this matter together, myself and Brother Paul.
Yeah.
And he has always made the point that no matter how strong a case is, there is always what they call litigation risk. And in fact, you'd have heard recently where there are cases that we have tried in our country. We have lost many cases in our country. And in fact, there was a famous case recently where one of the attorneys, who was an attorney general, lost a case at the CCJ. And he made the point that, in fact, you really cannot anticipate what's going to come out, no matter how good a case is. And that should be our guide. Whether, in fact, you have a good case, sometimes it's immaterial to whether or not you're going to go to court. I myself, for instance, if I think it's common sense. If somebody claims your land, you have a piece of land, you know it's yours, and the neighbor claims your land, I won't agree to go to court. If you want to take it to court, it's a different matter. But I would agree to go to court to litigate my land, because it's my land. But if they take it to court, that's a different matter. So the point I'm making then is that having looked at what has happened before, it tells me that we have to be careful in how we are going to proceed in this whole matter. Furthermore, there is a concern that we have in terms of looking at what has been accomplished so far. And what we have accomplished so far is the fact that when we got our independence, there was a definite resolution which also provided a way forward for Belize in terms of the United Nations saying to us that they're behind us and that they're going to support us thereafter, after independence. And so now then, the question then is, what has happened that has allowed us to be in the position where we are now, where we now need to litigate our country, when in fact, in those years before, we have been told that in fact this is our country and the United Nations are going to support us. And so all I see really out of that is the fact that there must have been some terrific, some extraordinary negligence on our behalf, not to have followed up on that resolution, because the mere provision provided the framework for moving forward. And it would have meant that the whole world was behind us. Remember when that vote was taken? 139 countries voted in favor of Belize. There were 7 abstentions and nobody voted against. Even Guatemala didn't vote against the resolution.
Now, what I'm hearing from you, I think one of the things that perhaps hasn't been included in the conversation is where you have defined your position as not taking this issue to the ICJ. We do have a persistent problem. And that problem is that there is a country that places a claim on our Belize. Guatemala has been claiming Belize, continues to claim Belize. We have incursions at Chiquibull. We have incursions down in the Sarstoon. We have issues of confrontation with military personnel in the Sarstoon. So I want us to speak of that particular issue, because it's not just saying don't go to the ICJ because Belize is ours. We have a country exerting what they feel is their authority over our territory.
Well, let us combine this issue with the question before.
Yeah.
If you look at one of the things I know, and I'm sure you know and the listening audience will understand, is that when you're trying to solve a problem, if you ask the wrong questions, you might get the right answer for those questions that you asked, but you will not solve the problem. Piling things all over the place will not help Belize in making this decision whether or not to go to the ICJ under this particular document. First, let us see what are the operative facts. The fact is that this document says that we're going to the ICJ to do, one, to listen to Guatemala's claims, any and all, so long as they can frame it legally. Second thing is for the ICJ to determine whether or not Guatemala has rights within Belize and to declare those rights, which would be a clear violation of our sovereignty. And third, for the ICJ to determine the boundaries of Belize, which is a clear violation of our territorial integrity. Has nothing to do with anything else. Our decision not to utilize the ICJ under this compromise has to be limited to this compromise. It cannot, see Marlene, I would warn against mixing the issues.
I hear what you're saying, but if we are to look at the nature of human beings, and we are to be honest with ourselves about how we make decisions, and that's why I said it's wonderful that we included the compromise early in the conversation, because that seems to have been a fact lost in this conversation sometimes, that we did make this decision to make this decision next year 10 years ago. And it is an important step in the process, but we focus on the now, and the threats that we perceive are in the now, and we are guided very heavily by the emotions that we feel as well. And one cannot deny, while I don't have a poll to be able, or no one in this country has any hard data on how Belizeans will be making their decisions, it is difficult for me to understand that you expect Belizeans to separate the Sarstoon issue, separate the Chiquibul issue, when making this very important, emotionally grounded decision come next April.
Well, I will tell you, Marlene, just before you, I will tell you that they must make that differentiation, because this is a bad deal. If we go to the ICJ on this, the ICJ won't be considering whether or not Guatemala is aggressing Belize on the Sarstoon. That is not the issue. The issue at the ICJ is listen to Guatemala's claim, decide if they have rights, give them their rights if they decide so, decide what our boundaries will be, and declare our boundaries. It has nothing to do with anything else. And that is why we're saying no. Now, I want to give you something on what you asked, though. The way forward. What is it that we can do for ourselves in the face of all of these other issues that we face? Now, that is another conversation.
Yes.
And I know that Brother Hubert wanted to say something, so I just paused there.
No, I think it's a good point, Marlene, but I think we need to ask ourselves, how is it that we got where we are right now? And what's happening with the ICJ is no different from what's happening in everything else in our country. We feel there's a sad lack of leadership in our country. We don't plan, we don't strategize enough. In fact, I've heard recently now where there's a release that was made a couple of weeks ago that in fact they now have a strategy to contain the on Sarstoon. There's a release recently. It was never said before. It's only now that they're going to ICJ, we seem to be developing a strategy for defense for our country. But this is where we are right now. There has been no strategy at all in terms of how we're going to deal with this whole matter of Guatemala. And that's the reason why we are where we are right now. Because I would have thought that having had that resolution of the United Nations some years ago, that would have developed our own strategy to maintain. Because with these things, you have to have if you have an enemy who is coming to you with a certain claim, he's going to continue to come to you, and he continues coming to you with a certain claim. It doesn't mean that you have to drop your position. You have to develop a way in which you're going to maintain your strength. But we have not at all had any strategy and so we've actually condescended, or we've actually acquiesced to the claim by matter of time, over time, because we don't have a strategy ourselves, you know. And so that's where we are right now. So the fact that we now have this claim and it is persistent, what is more my concern is the fact that we haven't had a strategy to overcome the claim, and that's where we are right now.
I'm glad you brought up strategy, because that brings me to another important point. We are at the country, led by the government at this time and the Referendum Commission, they're undertaking the education campaign for the referendum vote on whether or not to go to the ICJ. And I want to ask directly, because there has been a lot of questions about how the campaign is being formulated and who is included. And the education campaign should, in all fairness, include both sides. As a proponent of the no vote, those who are pushing for a no vote, have you been involved, contacted, and what are your thoughts on the education campaign?
We have never been reached out to by the government or any agency that is conducting an ICJ education campaign. Whatever you see of us is what you get. We pay our own way all around. We get the engagements that people ask for. You know well that you just called and we arrived. By the way, if there is any person out there who wants a presentation from us, we are always willing, you know.
But I will say too, though, that there was a meeting recently that was held, and by the OAS, they invited several persons to meet with them, civil society organizations to meet with them. And my understanding is that out of that meeting, the OAS made a position known, which is that to say that they were not supporting any position, and that therefore, whatever funds they have in terms of supporting, it would be used more for the purpose of promoting, you know, a neutral position, which I think is a very sad. It's really not right, because we feel that you could also do the same thing by supporting both positions instead of supporting one position. In reality, there are persons who are going to take sides, and so
that's what we're asking people to do next year.
It's a fundamental error, I think, that they've made in saying that they would want to hear whoever they support to take a neutral position. It's an error. It's a mistake, and we don't agree with them at all. And so we feel that it's a wrong approach, and it does take some effort to involve in this kind of campaign and resources, no?
If you would be asked to participate in the education process, would you?
Wholeheartedly, yes. Yes.
Definitely.
We hope they call.
Yeah.
Now, moving forward, I want us to cover as much as we can in the time that we have. And you were moving into the point. What has been communicated to the Belizean people about the process of going to the ICJ and leading to the signing of the special agreement is that when it comes to the unfounded Guatemalan claim over Belize, we have exhausted all options. And this is a continuous message that the Belizean public is hearing, that we have tried numerous methods and strategies under the guidance of the OAS, and when essentially you couldn't move forward, they said, okay, well, take it to court. Take it to the ICJ in this particular case. Now, if you are telling people, vote no to the ICJ, and the message from the other side is saying the ICJ is our last hope, then you must have an alternative view as to what can be done instead of taking this issue to court.
And we surely do. You see, Marlene, Belize is not being claimed because Guatemala loves the people of Belize. The elite of Guatemala, I will wager that they would not give a dime for the people of Belize. We are being claimed because we have resources and we're weak. We can't defend those resources. So one of the major issues to defend, or one of the first way forward, is not external. Our problem is within Belize. Try development. Try national development, a structured approach to national development. Try strengthening our democracy. Try strengthening our economy. Try strengthening our capacity then to defend our resources and to protect our resources. That is one of the biggest things I think we haven't been trying since independence. National development. It's right here in front of us. We can't see that. The next thing is that when it comes to the United Nations process, the Pacific resolution of disputes, there are other things that we can do. One of the biggest issues, you hear it all the time, is we have the 1859 treaty. Well, Guatemala says that has been repudiated. We don't recognize it anymore. It's true. There is a process under the United Nations Charter that allows a country, a member state, to ask the organ, the General Assembly or the Security Council to request an opinion from the ICJ. Belize has not even attempted that. There must be a reason for it, why they haven't attempted over the past 30-some years of independence. Why is it that we haven't moved diplomatically to get an opinion from the ICJ as to the legitimacy of this? Now, what would that do? We get an opinion. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say this sounds very similar to what Ambassador Gibson has shared with us
Yes.
as one of the potential
Yes.
options,
Yes.
which is validating the 1859 treaty at the ICJ.
Yes.
And just to be able to provide the information, we did speak about this with Foreign Minister Elrington, and he spoke of it being, I don't want to use the wrong words, but that to bring an end to the claim, a finality to the claim, would be taking the legal arguments instead, because there would still be a claim even if there is a validation of the treaty.
So what would the Foreign Minister say is the hurry? Why don't we first look at what might well be on our side? Mm-hmm. Let us validate the treaty first. If the treaty is not valid, according to the ICJ, we're not bound at all. It's just an opinion. If it is valid, it would impact the negotiations later with Guatemala. What is wrong with our diplomats? Why don't they put the horse in front of the cart?
Okay.
No, I maintain, Marilyn, that in fact there has been a failure of our diplomatic effort in the past, which I think could be resolved, which could be, it might take new leadership, but certainly there was a mechanism provided for us to be able to resolve this matter. It has not been used, and there has not been no accountability. There has not been any accountability for this, what I term to be the mismanagement of that particular resolution. And so, I believe that if we were to able to, if we are able to go back and get that resolution and require from the United Nations from them to assist us in implementing the resolution, we could make progress without having the problems are not necessarily solved legally, they could be solved also politically. And there has to be a political dimension to this whole matter. In fact, some years ago, and in fact, perhaps that was better, because even if you go to the court, it doesn't mean that the problem is going to go away. You know, so there needs to be some political dimension to this whole matter to resolve it peacefully between both countries. And that was a mechanism provided before. I think we could use it, and but just as we have mismanaged it before, and if we do manage it now, I believe it could help to resolve the problem without having to go to court. Yeah.
Now, you spoke of being open to engagements anywhere. I know you've spoken with Chamber, you've spoken with several different institutions.
Yes,
what are you hearing from people when you go out and you make this presentation about why, what your arguments are on why we should not go to the ICJ? What are you hearing?
Overwhelmingly, they agree with us. But what we have been sensing is a pushback from those who are, I would say, benefiting from this kind of confusion, this corrupt system that we have. The pushback is minimal, very minimal. And it's basically without much reasoning behind it. So to answer your question, we're hearing great things. I think the people are wiser than the leadership thinks.
Well,
Okay.
well, I think two things, Marlene. One, in fact, we've had a meeting last week. We were invited to the mix of the chamber. And my sense is that after that meeting, there are persons who saw things very differently, because they had that discussion with the, Mr. Schumann before, some weeks before. And my feeling from coming from that meeting was that people were very much surprised to hear that there were different arguments that were being put forward, which they actually agreed with. But I think also that we need to, and perhaps this is where the media comes in, to ask the big questions. Like, for instance, it needs to be clarified, because personally, I'm not yet thought what are going to be the consequences of the decision that we take on the ICJ. Like, for instance, if we vote to go to the ICJ and there's an adverse ruling of the ICJ, what is it going to mean for persons who perhaps in the affected areas? And I think that we have not begun to think about those issues.
Well, that question was asked the foreign minister by a student who lives in Punta Gorda, and he gave a very direct response to it. I will provide that to you as well. But I want to bring this back, because when you speak of going out and talking to people, I really love that you said, or it's very interesting that you said that people are a lot more informed than we are generalizing them to be. And what seems to be the predominant question? So someone who is on the fence and listening to the yes, people pushing for yes vote, hear you now coming forward with your reasons why Belizeans should vote no. What's a primary question or query that you hear from them?
I hear an opinion. I don't hear a question.
You don't hear.
I hear them saying, like, why are we going to the ICJ?
Okay.
Sometimes with good expletives,
Okay.
as my brothers at the workshop would say, you know, why are we going to the ICJ?
Okay.
What is there to gain from it?
Yes.
Their opinion is no. But I wanted to touch on something that came up just now incidentally. Somebody from Punta Gorda asked the question. Well, there's a false belief around that, a false narrative that in fact the area that is most vulnerable is the South. In fact,
It's entirely.
in fact, it might be the opposite way. Our brothers in the North, you might not have heard this yet, but the Northerners might be more vulnerable to Guatemala's claim under this regime, this legal regime with treaties, than the South. Let me tell you why. The North, from Sibun to the Rio Hondo, was not acquisitively prescribed. In other words, it wasn't gotten by squatters' rights. Because when Britain agreed with Spain, it was for logging rights. It wasn't for settlement or taking of territory. It was for logging rights. And regardless of how long you stay in an area with permission, it does not begin the period to count as squatters' rights. It wasn't gotten adversely, they call it. Now, from the Sibun to the Sarstoon, the British just walked across and took it. That was adversely gotten. And so, under our regime, when we say we got Belize under acquisitive prescription, the only area that was acquisitively prescribed is from the Sibun to the Sarstoon. So we might be shocked at the at the ICJ to know that Guatemala knew this all along and decided to surround us from west, south, and north, and pick on the north.
And we would only know that
When they
if we
claim.
go
When
to
they
the
claim.
ICJ.
Yeah.
But that's moving a step ahead of
Yeah.
the referendum itself.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, because we're running out of time so quickly, where can people read the information you've put together? Where can people hear from you directly and ask you the questions that they have? Perhaps they are leaning towards a yes and want to hear the no, or perhaps have a no vote already in mind or still deciding. How can they get this information from you?
Yeah. Well, of course, we have done some writings
Yeah.
on it. We have Facebook, like for instance, on my page, I have a note there. It speaks about the whole matter. In fact, I know that several students of UB have always called me and asked me for my bio to speak about the issues. And I think Paul has done the same thing in Paul is at 6 Lubantun
Yes,
in
no.
Belmopan, and he has a telephone number. But I want to quickly say that we're working on a legal challenge to challenge this whole matter of the constitutional, in our opinion, violation. And we've gotten some advice from some lawyers, abroad, mind you, not local lawyers, because they all seem to be afraid of touching this case locally. And it is going to cost some pretty money. And so we've opened an account for persons who want to help to contribute to the account. And just for the purpose of saying it now, the account is at Scotiabank, and the number of the account there is 183-5472 for persons who want to help us contribute towards this.
In the name
And
of
that constitutional challenge would be to the origins, to the special agreement.
to the special agreement.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
But
And
yes, go ahead.
yeah, and my number is in the telephone directory. It's right there, 822-3305, or my cell is 605-3529.
Yes.
You could call me and anytime.
Okay, closing points, gentlemen.
Okay, well, I will reiterate that Belizeans must not be sidetracked with all of the issues. The big question must be, should we go to the ICJ based on this document, not on anything else? And if this document is saying that we're going to listen to Guatemala's claim and the ICJ will have the right to determine rights for Guatemala within Belize and to determine our boundaries, I think the clear answer, any reasonable Belizean must say no, because it is not as urgent, it is not very urgent to go to the ICJ. There is no major pressure, at least that we know about now. That is my closing argument. Please, Belizeans, don't be sidetracked. The issue is the special agreement, nothing else.
Well, I would say that we need to have persons to come out to vote on a particular day itself. We are hoping, or we feel that at this point in time, the majority of persons are going to vote no to the ICJ. And what it will do really is to send a resounding message to the international community and to Guatemala as well, that in fact, Belizeans are serious about their territorial integrity. We think that this matter shouldn't be politicized, that the government has to provide resources for Belizeans to hear both sides of the story, not only one side of the story. Because at the end of the day, when we make the decision and if in fact we go to the ICJ, all of us are going to be affected. So I would want to encourage Belizeans to get in touch with persons to get all the education they can on this whole matter, and to go to vote with the understanding of the entire issue. And that's the only way, in my mind, we can actually make progress in our country and come away from this in the best way.
Well, thank you for coming in
Right.
and for sharing this information with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
fast,
Tamara.
man.
All right,
Thank
we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be speaking about a campaign to prevent childhood obesity in Belize. So stay tuned.